In the shadow of war, human psychology doesn't collapse under explosions. It fractures silently, like glass under slow pressure. It is not always the loudest moments that change us. More often, it's the ones that pass unnoticed, the subtle cracking of the self, underweight no one else can see. A soldier crouches in an empty hallway, not because the enemy is near, but because his body no longer believes silence is safe. A mother hesitates before stepping into her own kitchen, unsure why the scent of boiling potatoes now brings a rush of dread. These aren't dramatic moments. They're fractures, hairline splits in the internal compass that once pointed towards safety. War doesn't only happen on battlefields. It blooms quietly in the corridors of homes, in classrooms where children flinch at chalk tapping on the board. It seeps into dinners where families chew mechanically, their thoughts looping elsewhere. This is the unseen war, the psychological aftershock that ripples out long after the guns fall quiet. The human mind, built for continuity, struggles to make sense of events that tear time apart. When the ordinary becomes unpredictable, the psyche loses its trust in the world. The aftermath is not only found in ruins and headlines. It is in the tremble that goes unnoticed by strangers, in the fixed stare of someone who forgets where they are mid-sentence. These are the echoes of war, sounding not in drums or tanks, but in synapses misfiring, in breath held too long. A soldier returning home doesn't walk back into peace. He walks into a familiar world that no longer feels true. The streets look the same, but the light feels wrong. The clock ticks, but it sounds slower, thicker, like time itself is resisting forward motion. We like to think we understand war through numbers, the dead, the wounded, the vanished. But numbers do not tell the story. They abstract the human cost, wrapping chaos in tidy statistics. What they miss is the invisible shift in perception when someone no longer believes a door is just a door. It might be a trap, a memory, or an echo. Trauma bends reality. It loops time, so that one loud sound can send the mind back to a place it never wanted to return. In this loop, trauma becomes routine, an involuntary ritual of remembering, triggered by sights, smells, or silence itself. The bomb is not what shatters the mind. It is the moment afterward, when everything is still standing, but nothing feels real. Uncertainty becomes a constant companion. It is the uncertainty of waking up and not knowing if today will echo yesterday's horrors. The mind, built to find meaning, collapses when meaning itself is stripped away. For many, war does not arrive as a tank or gunfire, but as a smell, a tone, a tremor, a burnt glove in the corner of a room, a siren that plays on the edge of consciousness, even when no alarm has sounded, a child's laughter that sounds just a little too forced, too hollow. These fragments are not just memories. They are dissonant pieces of a world that once made sense, and now, the psyche cannot reconcile them with the world it is forced to live in. This is the fracture point, the moment when the mind tries to hold two truths, what once was and what now is, the home before the airstrike and the one after, with its missing wall and broken frame, the self who believed the future could be planned, and the one who flinches at fireworks. It is not that one self replaces the other. It is that both try to exist in the same body, pulling in opposite directions. The result is internal chaos that looks like composure from the outside, but feels like drowning from within. The real damage lies in this invisible space, between memory and presence, between the person who once felt anchored and the person who now floats, untethered, through daily life. There is a loneliness here that has no language. You can't explain to someone why walking past a bakery makes your palms sweat, or why the wind slamming a window sends your heart racing. These are not stories you tell. They are sensations you carry, silently. This is where the psyche begins to redefine itself, not in terms of what happened, but in terms of what can no longer be trusted. The self shrinks around the wounds, forming a new identity that knows how to survive, but no longer knows how to live. A soldier no longer trusts joy. A child no longer trusts quiet. A parent no longer trusts the future. These are the quietest victories of war. Victories not won on battlefields, but in minds rewritten to expect loss. War, at its core, is a distortion of time and place. It takes what was stable and warps it. It teaches the mind that safety is a lie, that plans are foolish, and that love is dangerous because it can be taken. These beliefs do not fade easily. They embed themselves like shrapnel, each memory a sharp edge pressing against the present. And yet, the world moves on. The headlines shift. The buildings are rebuilt. But the people, those who carry the war inside, are rarely asked how they're still standing. They smile, they work, they try. But beneath the surface, their inner landscape has been scorched. Some find ways to grow around it. Others wither in silence. Because war doesn't end when the treaties are signed. It ends when the mind can finally stop bracing for impact. And for many, that day never comes. War unravels the fabric of meaning. Rewrite, Part 2, 8,000 characters. War doesn't just burn homes or break bodies. It slowly disassembles the architecture of meaning. A flag once waved to signal unity, pride, or a place called home. Now, it flutters in dirty wind, half consumed by smoke. No longer a beacon, but a remnant. A statue, meant to immortalize valor, becomes a silhouette in the crosshairs, reduced to rubble without ceremony. Even the words we thought were carved in stone, honor, enemy, freedom, begin to lose their definition. Their edges blur, eroded by repetition and contradiction, until they slip through the cracks of comprehension like sand through clenched fists. Symbols don't survive fire intact. They return altered, twisted, ghosts of former certainties. Inside the blast radius of conflict, the surreal becomes the rhythm of life. A man crouches by a crater, shielding a flame to light his cigarette, smoke curling upward, beside scorched asphalt. A mother cradles her baby beneath the collapsing balcony, her voice humming a lullaby against the shrill rise of sirens. These aren't acts of defiance. They are quiet negotiations with chaos, desperate attempts to mimic the rituals of normal life in a reality where gravity no longer feels constant. But even these gestures begin to falter.
If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support.
Familiar actions lose context. A handshake doesn't promise peace. It invites suspicion. A shared glance across a street isn't connection. It's a veiled alert. War strips gestures of their meaning and replaces them with hesitation, with double meanings. Trust becomes a scarce commodity, affection a risk. Beneath each exchange is the question no one says aloud. Are you who you seem to be? And so, in this constant recalibration, the psyche doesn't shatter. It divides. It adapts through fragmentation. One half reaches back, clutching the smells of home-cooked meals, the texture of a familiar song, the warmth of peacetime sunlight on skin. The other half hardens like callus, worn down by alarms, betrayals, and the need to keep moving. Between these halves, something silent grows, a space that neither memory nor vigilance can fully occupy. This isn't emptiness, it's something worse. A quiet, echoing place where no part of the self feels entirely at home anymore. This internal rift deepens as the days stretch. Words become scarce, not because there's nothing to say, but because the words no longer fit. How do you explain that the birdsong you hear reminds you not of peace, but of the morning a shell landed 2 houses away? Or that the scent of burning meat triggers not hunger, but fear? Language falters, so does time. Days blur, nights become indistinct. The mind stops marking hours by sunrise or meals, and instead starts measuring by the sounds of sirens or the rhythm of distant artillery. The calendar dissolves, replaced by instinct. You eat when it's quiet. You sleep when your body demands it. You speak less, not from unwillingness, but from fatigue, because explaining the weight you carry is heavier than carrying it. What remains then is not a single self, but a layered one. There is the face shown to others, alert, calculating, functional, the survivor. Then, beneath that, is the face that remembers who you used to be, what used to matter. And finally, somewhere deeper, is the face that no longer knows how to feel at all. It doesn't cry, doesn't dream, doesn't hope. It just waits, without knowing what for. This is the real battlefield, not a place marked on maps, but a space carved into human identity. The war doesn't need to kill the body to claim victory. It simply needs to hollow out the core, to make you unsure if anything you once believed still holds. Some survivors walk away with limbs intact, but with a psyche rearranged so thoroughly they no longer recognize their own reflection. They speak with the same voice, but from behind different eyes. This is the quiet outcome of war that reports never measure. Not who died, but who changed. beyond repair. The body counts end. The gunfire stops. But the meanings, those slippery, fragile constructs we depend on, do not return. The war outlasts itself by echoing inside the people it touched. It lives on in pauses, in smells, in how someone flinches at the sound of breaking glass. And perhaps that is the war's most enduring triumph. It doesn't just destroy what we build. It redefines what it means to be, to feel, to trust, to remember. And in doing so, it ensures that long after the last shot is fired, its shadow remains stitched into the fabric of identity. When war ends, it never truly leaves. Expanded rewrite. 9,000 characters. When the guns finally fall silent, when the smoke clears and the last echo of artillery fades into memory, war does not simply walk away. It does not pack its bags and vanish. Instead, it settles deep into the bones of a generation, a quiet but unyielding tenant embedded in the very marrow of those who lived through it, and those who come after. Long after the last bullet pierces the air, the human body remembers. The nervous system remains keyed to a frequency no longer broadcast, a subtle and constant hum of danger that no longer exists, but refuses to be silenced. A slammed door, harmless in any other time, explodes like a distant detonation, a phantom blast that twists the gut. A silence stretches too long, becoming heavy with unspoken warnings, thick with the weight of unseen threats. The peace that arrives at last is strange and unfamiliar. It's not the relief one imagines. It's too quiet, almost alien, like wearing a borrowed suit that hangs loose and stiff, a reminder that nothing fits quite right anymore. Across cities and villages, entire cultures begin to transform under the weight of what they have endured. Survival shapes every choice, every gesture, every pattern of thought. Caution, once simply prudent, becomes wisdom itself, a guiding principle learned through loss and fear. Suspicion, born of necessity, slowly hardens into a default stance, a shield raised against imagined dangers as much as real ones. Laughter, once spontaneous and free, becomes rare and sharp, edged with guilt and shadowed by the ghosts of those who cannot laugh anymore. The traces of war imprint themselves even on the built environment. Walls grow thicker, windows smaller, not just as protection from physical threats, but as architectural scars of trauma. Houses designed not for comfort or light, but for defense, for hiding, for surviving another day. Streets grow quieter, conversations more guarded, silences more loaded. The lullabies parents hum to their children change too, losing their simple joy and rhythm. They become darker stories, where happy endings are omitted or whispered in coded tones. In the oral traditions, the narratives pass down through generations. It is not the triumphs that endure, but the losses, the friends, the innocence, the trust that form the foundation of collective memory. Children born long after the war's official end still breathe its memory like air. They inherit the trauma, not in textbooks or lessons, but in the hesitant looks of their parents, the pauses before certain words, the invisible rules etched into daily life. A glance over the shoulder, a sudden stiffening when a stranger approaches, a reluctance to speak openly about fears. Trauma, when left unspoken, seeps quietly through generations like an uninvited legacy, a silent inheritance shaping identities before they even fully form. In this way, what began as a desperate survival mechanism becomes something far more permanent. A nation, a community, a family once proud of resilience can begin to mistake emotional numbness for strength, silence for peace, vigilance for wisdom. The lines between endurance and entrapment blur. People stop recognizing the signs of ongoing harm because those signs have become their new normal. There is a profound danger here, not just in the physical destruction war wreaks, but in the psychological lessons it inscribes. If pain becomes tradition, passed down as something to bear rather than heal, if fear is taught as the ultimate guide to safety rather than a temporary state, then healing itself starts to feel like betrayal. The very idea of moving beyond trauma becomes suspect, a form of forgetting or weakness. The hardest thing, it turns out, is not surviving war, but learning to stop living as if it is still happening. This struggle unfolds in every corner of post-war life, in the hushed conversations about the way things are, in the reluctance to break the cycle of suspicion and silence, in the unspoken agreements to carry burdens alone. Trust becomes a fragile, endangered resource. Communities fracture under the weight of shared but unprocessed pain. The simplest interactions, smiles, hugs, honest words, are sometimes met with surprise or suspicion, as if kindness itself must be questioned. Even the physical bodies bear witness to this legacy. Stress etches lines deeper into faces. Sleepless nights multiply. Heartbeats quicken for no clear reason. Doctors name it as PTSD, depression, anxiety. But those labels only scratch the surface. Beneath them lies a collective wound that refuses to close, a scar that war's survivors and their descendants carry as part of their identity. Yet, within this difficult reality, there is a flicker of hope. Awareness is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Recognizing that trauma's legacy is not destiny allows space for new stories to emerge. It means understanding that healing is not forgetting, but reclaiming. That peace is not the absence of conflict alone, but the presence of understanding, connection, and reconciliation. The path toward this transformation is neither quick nor easy. It requires courage to confront not just the memories of violence, but the silent fears and defenses that war taught us to carry. It demands a collective willingness to rebuild, not only cities and infrastructure, but the emotional landscapes of trust and hope. It means listening deeply to those whose stories were once silenced, creating spaces where grief can be expressed without judgment, and where compassion replaces suspicion. In this process, cultures can begin to reimagine themselves. Walls may still be built, but as symbols of care and shelter rather than fear. Lullabies regain their songs of light. Stories once shaped by loss start to hold space for renewal. Generations can breathe freer, no longer weighed down by inherited shadows. Ultimately, the legacy of war is not fixed. It is a narrative that can be rewritten. By choosing to face pain honestly, by refusing to let fear dictate our lives, by embracing the hard work of healing, individuals and societies can move from the ruins of destruction toward the fragile but powerful ground of peace. This journey is ongoing, marked by setbacks and breakthroughs. It asks each of us to look beyond survival toward thriving, to find the humanity in ourselves and in others, to remember that peace is not merely silence after gunfire, but a state of being that must be nurtured every day. Healing after war. A journey beyond memory and pain. Healing after war is not about erasing the past or pretending the horrors never happened. It is not a simple act of forgetting, nor is it the denial of what was lost. True healing begins with a profound shift, a transformation in how we remember. It is learning to hold the weight of the past without letting it suffocate the present moment, to carry the memories with a gentleness that allows life to continue, even thrive. Wounds inflicted by war leave scars, some invisible, others etched deeply upon the soul and body. These scars do not fade with time, nor do they signify weakness. Instead, they stand as testimonies, reminders that pain was endured, that survival was chosen over surrender. They mark the places where we were broken but refused to be destroyed. They bear witness to resilience, a quiet strength forged in fire. In the immediate aftermath of conflict, the physical rebuilding of cities, roads, and bridges is urgent and visible. Yet the far more fragile and complex work lies in restoring something far less tangible: the capacity to feel again. The ability to trust that a simple knock at the door does not herald danger. To believe that love is no longer a battlefield where wounds are exchanged, but a space where gentleness can grow and flourish. This kind of healing is slow. It rarely announces itself with fanfare. It happens in the quiet, almost imperceptible moments, small decisions that ripple outward, choosing to reach out instead of retreating into silence, deciding to soften where hardness has long been the armor. It means allowing vulnerability to seep through cracks where once only fear and rigidity lived. Generations born and raised in the shadow of war inherit a complex legacy. They learn a language shaped by silence and guardedness. To unlearn this language is a daunting task. It means relearning what safety sounds like, what it feels like in the body. Safety is not the absence of noise or conflict, but a presence, an internal state where one no longer flinches at every sudden sound or unexpected touch. Strength, too, requires redefinition. In wartime, strength was often measured by how little one showed emotion, how unyielding one could be in the face of terror. But true courage in healing is not about charging into battle. It is about staying still enough to listen to the heart's quiet calls. It is the bravery of softening, of opening when all instincts scream to close. Healing is a gradual unfolding, like spring's slow return after a long, bitter winter. It does not burst forth all at once. It creeps forward, hesitant and tentative. Fear walks beside it, whispering doubts and threats. But warmth begins to rise, small and steady, a light within the darkness. This warmth nurtures the fragile shoots of renewal, reminding us that despite all that has been endured, growth is possible. This process reshapes identities. We begin to see ourselves not only as survivors of trauma, but as architects of new possibilities. We are not defined solely by what was done to us, but also by what we choose to become in response. The past remains, but it no longer commands the narrative. The story is rewritten, not with denial or forgetting, but with a reclaimed agency. Healing after war also requires community. It is not a solitary journey, but a collective one. Safe spaces must be created where stories can be shared without fear of judgment or rejection, where grief is met with compassion rather than dismissal, where empathy replaces suspicion. Such environments become gardens where trust can be planted and nurtured, slowly transforming barren ground into fertile soil. This communal healing extends beyond the personal to the societal level. It challenges systems that perpetuate silence and stigma around trauma. It calls for education that recognizes the complexity of suffering and resilience, for political will that prioritizes emotional restoration alongside physical reconstruction, for media and culture that portray survivors not just as victims, but as carriers of strength and hope. On a personal level, healing demands patience. There are no shortcuts or quick fixes. The journey is marked by setbacks as well as breakthroughs, moments of despair alongside sparks of joy. It invites us to hold contradictions, to feel sorrow and gratitude in the same breath, to allow ourselves to grieve losses while imagining futures unbound by them. The path of healing ultimately leads to transformation. It is the movement from fragmentation toward wholeness, from isolation to connection, from fear to courage, from silence to voice. It is an ongoing practice of self-compassion and community care, a daily commitment to tending the wounds that war inflicted and choosing life in spite of them. We learn that peace is not merely the absence of violence, but a presence of understanding, kindness, and hope. That healing is not forgetting the past, but remembering it differently, with openness and grace. That the scars we carry do not limit us, but can become the roots of new strength. In this way, the aftermath of war, while marked by pain and loss, also holds the possibility of profound renewal. The story of healing is a testament to the enduring human spirit, the capacity to rise, to grow, and to transform even in the shadow of great darkness.